They used homeless people as pawns. It was created purposefully to have the crisis, to create social service funding. Even the, $68 million they first emergency authorized when all of a sudden these came up. You look at the actual number of dollars that went to them, 5%.
Hey everybody, John McClellan here, Influence ATX, that's Influence ATX. Check out the podcast. Subscribe below if you want to be alerted to anything else we have going on. This is a podcast about Austin, Texas, about the influencers, about the people who make this city a great city. And it's about what we're going to do about the future too. And today I'm honored to have one of my, first of all, good friends, a guy that everybody knows his voice, Mr. Bob Cole. Bob, thank you very much for being on the show today. You know, I was doing some research just about, some of your awards and accolades and things like that. And I got the list, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure how I'm going to convey this over a show because there's just too many. So I took a few.
Well, let's start now and go through.
Yeah, it could take up the whole show if I did that. It could take up the whole show.
Been around a long time. It's kind of like the reason you have me on. When you've been around a long time, they eventually run out of people to give awards to. And I guess you've already, as short a time as this show's been on, this podcast, You've run out of people to have people say, why'd you ask me?
Well, I got the Bob Cole Award, I think, is what we got. It's what we're going to get for this. But I just want to say you're a partner and radio show host on KOKE FM, right? You are Country Music Hall of Fame in 2003. Must be
Where'd
very
you get
proud.
all this?
It's online. There's a thing called the internet, Bob.
What else?
It's amazing. You got Texas Radio Hall of Fame. You've been inducted into that, too. Congratulations. Humanitarian of the Year, Award of Honor for Preserving Austin. We're going to talk about that. It's very important. Best Show on Local Issues. Local Air Personality of the Year. Best Radio Disc Jockey with Sammy. State of Texas Law Enforcement Citizen of the Year. Disc Jockey of the Year. Austin Personality of the Year. I can attest to that. Austin Radio Show of the Year. You must be really proud of that, putting all the hours you put in. And then there's so many more, I couldn't even list them on here. I don't think my word program would hold them all. But there's one that kept popping up, and it was the phrase, Barbecue Bob Cole. So tell me about Barbecue Bob Cole.
Well, who amongst us doesn't love barbecue? I don't remember the year. I'm going to guess late 70s, early 80s. So I'm on the old KOKE FM.
Mm-hmm. Was that on Lamar, right?
On Lamar, and back then the frequency was like 95.5.
Yeah.
Which is now magic. But we were challenging, back then, the number one radio station for the country audience and gone on the air as a more mainstream country to challenge KVET. KVET, at the time, was just an AM station, but in the late 70s, they would have these unbelievable shares with Ron Rogers and all there, and Sammy was there, and Arlie Duff, Jim W. Travis. I mean, they just had an incredible lineup. Lalo Campos, I mean, it was a legendary station. But Sammy...
and I remember it had the big the KOKE sign on Lamar. Every time you drove down, you could see it.
That black and white Sterling Country sign.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, good memory.
Yeah.
So I'd heard at your age.
At my age, it's kind of hard with the memory. But
by the way, not that this line of questioning is not reminiscent and wonderful, but I thought this was a podcast on murders. And I thought we were going to look at the murders.
That's coming.
Okay, all right.
There's some guys.
I'm really prepared.
There's some guys waiting behind this black tarp right here. So Barbecue Bob Cole.
So Sammy would, he liked to needle people. That's what he called it, and he was the best at it.
He got in trouble for it a few times.
Ultimately, the consummate, you can't work here anymore trouble. Actually, I had him several times over the years, but. A guy named Tony Tilford, who has one of the best advertising agencies, one of the long-lasting ones. Not all of them last long. GSD&M has. The Tilford Agency has. Tony decided I was the right guy to represent Richard Jones Barbecue. Yes. And he had 2 or 3 locations, and Richard Jones had great barbecue. So
you just saying it, Richard Jones Barbecue, floods back all the memories.
John, they had the Bob Cole platter, which was basically the glutton special. And it was a lot of money back then. It was like $22. And it was this big. It had 6 ribs, a pound of ham, a couple of full briskets, sausage. I mean, it was a Bob Cole platter. You could order it all.
Yeah.
It was an honor to have that on on the menu. But the commercial was really pretty basic. It was pretty much a picnic table with a red checker tablecloth, and here's all this barbecue, including the Bob Cole platter. And on the TV commercial, I say, if you love barbecue like I do, you got to come to Richard Jones Pit Barbecue. Well, Sammy would see those, and I think at the end of the day thought he should have been the guy. So when he'd go on the radio on KVET, now remember I'm over here.
Yeah.
Everybody see Barbecue Bob? Any reference became, and he would create reason for reference because he was so good at tweaking you, needling you. Barbecue Bob. So at first I was like, well, I guess I'm supposed to be mad. And that's what he wants. He admitted that. He did that with a lot of people. He'd give them a nickname. If you're fat, he called you
Sounds
tiny.
like somebody I know in a high office right now.
George Bush did that. George Bush 43.
Yeah.
He had a nickname for everybody. Carl Rowe's nickname to this day, Turd Blossom.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Joe Albaugh was Big Country. Joe didn't like that. But that's the thing, you're not supposed to like it.
Yeah.
And I was pretty young, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to embrace that. And so I began occasional reference to my own self as Barbecue Bob. And he told me years later, he said, that was supposed to make you mad, and he never called me Bob, never called me Cole. I was, all those years with Sammy Allred, a legendary guy.
Yep.
Barbecue. He get like 9 syllables out of it. Barbecue. That's what he always said. So that's where that came from.
So speaking of where that came from, where did you come from, Bob? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I guess my mother.
Yeah.
Any other hard questions?
It's probably a good place to come from.
I used to try to keep it a secret, and you can't. I was born and raised in essentially Miami, Florida. And before you laugh, yes, it is another country, but it's further south than we are.
Yeah.
And there is around Hialeah and South Dade.
You actually worked in radio down there.
I did. I knew that it's what I wanted to do for a little while, for fun. So I got started at 14 in a pretty big city. But all my relatives, both my mother and father's side, came from Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama. So that really my influence, but and I was actually born on a famous racetrack, still there, doesn't have big dates anymore, Hialeah. Hialeah is where Citation was.
Back up, wait, you were born on the racetrack?
Yeah, not because my mother was there betting, but the hospital across the street had their maternity ward, because the only other building they could get was right there by in the property by the racetrack. Yeah.
I just pictured somebody giving birth going around the track over and over and over again.
I have the same vision. But thank you. That's where it came from.
So
it took 7 years of Spanish because it was the height of the first Cuban immigration in the 60s, And I still can't speak Spanish, and I regret that. I'm working on it. Me habla muy poquito español.
Yeah, me too.
¿Comprende?
Sí.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien, ¿y tú?
Regular.
Muy bien.
Yeah, enchiladas.
And tacos.
There we go.
Universal. We're going to get to tacos here in just a few minutes, but we're digressing. So in Miami, you were worked in a radio station. What do you think? Why do you think they hired you? Because of your good looks?
That's actually gotten away more than it's helped me. But no, obviously.
And was your voice the voice that I hear right now? Was it at 15 years old?
Even my mother had a pretty deep voice. But my first cousin on my mother's side, I kind of grew up around him. My dad wasn't around all that much. Always working out of town. Very proud of my dad. He was in the very first Marine Raiders unit of World War II.
Wow.
If I can brag on that for a second. But,
of course.
And I didn't understand any of this till after he died, because you didn't talk about it. And my mother always said, don't talk to him about it. What first ashore at Guadalcanal and Tulagi, and those very significant battles. And one of the few that actually lived in the company that he was assigned. But he wasn't around much, but my cousin was. Well, he wanted to be in the radio business and was. And in the summers, I'd go up to around Knoxville, Tennessee, where he was going to college, University of Tennessee, and had a job out in Oak Ridge, and I would just hang around the radio station. Then the next year he'd be at another radio station, and it just looked like fun. And my mother was in television as she was the secretary to the general manager at Channel 10 in Miami for probably 20-something years. So I was around broadcasting, and it looked like fun, but I really wanted to be a pilot and some other aspirations. But it's just something I wanted to do. I was an only child, one of those deals. So, I wasn't playing with a lot of kids my age. Man, I just wanted to get in that radio business because it looks like fun.
I think they came up with that saying, you have a voice for radio.
Or face for radio.
Yeah, face for radio. I think that's where it probably came from, was your voice, because it is. But your face is nice, too. I want to just kind of back up just a second. You're talking about your grandfather. I'm sorry, your father. My grandfather, who died about, it's probably been 15 or 20 years now. He was a B-52 pilot in World War II and many, many sorties over Germany. And I didn't know that until after he passed away.
Did you serve?
I did not.
Neither did I.
I wish that's one of the regrets I have.
Well, same here. And, interestingly, I was preparing to, and then I've always considered Richard Nixon one of the formative presidents I respected. And you don't usually hear that. Well, the main reason is I was sweating it out like crazy in high school because, it wasn't voluntary.
No, there was a draft.
They called you
for a lot of our watchers out there, if you're below a certain age, there was a draft in the United States, and I missed it by a year. Basically, it went away a year before I turned 18.
Same here, and that's that year is when Richard Nixon signed in the all-volunteer Army or draft. I said, well, I've been a little hasty about signing up for the Navy here, the Naval Air Corps. So I said, well, I'll just do the radio thing a little longer and then figure it out. The problem was, in being a pilot then, you want to be a commercial pilot. Well, that's where the big money was. But you had to have, to get on staff or to get hired, thousands of hours in jets. Well, the only practical way to get that is through the military.
Right.
We were in Vietnam, and all these guys were coming out with thousands and thousands of hours. So it really wasn't an advantage. And so I was, well, I'll just do this. And I'm 60 now, somewhere there, and I'm still doing it. So
you fly?
I think I do. I don't have a license. Like you, I have a lot of friends with airplanes. Well, that's like friends with boats, right?
Right.
But yeah,
hey,
and I know enough to be
the best everything is somebody else's, right?
Absolutely.
You have to put up with it.
OPA, so, other people's airplane.
That's not like that. So you're in Miami. You're traveling back to Tennessee, working in radio. How do you get to Austin, Texas?
Started at the big country station there, and there wasn't even that's,
in Miami.
Yeah, let me tell you how old I am. The word intern was there. It only ever applied to people wanting to be a doctor. Those were interns.
Yeah.
There weren't interns in the workplace or any other field. So you were
gophers is what we call.
You were a gopher or a hanger-oner.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I was born with this deeper than average voice. So I would get on the phone and I'd call the stations. Hello, I'm Bob Cole and I work at Channel 10, but I'm 14, and I want to be in the radio.
Right.
And I got some interviews finally. I sent the letters first. Nobody answered a single letter. I thought they were great letters. Nobody answered. Except the great Jim Dunlap, who was a legend. We lost a few years ago in San Antonio. Jim Dunlap ended up being married to, this is not why your viewers are tuned in. You remember the very first Lynn Russell on CNN? She was the news anchor with this all-news network, and people would travel all over the country, so
this
visit,
is
and they got to their hotel
in the 80s, right?
to watch the all-news network, and Lynn Russell would give you the news. Not the great story, but I thought it told it well.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, Jim talked to me. He says, well, here's what I do. And then finally, the guy at the country station. Now, I grew up all around country, so that's great. He said, I really don't have anything, but you want to come in tomorrow about 1 o'clock, I'll visit with you. So I got there, I had a red coat on, and I was all right.
How old are you at this point?
14.
You're 14.
Yeah.
Does he know you're 14?
No. So I wait in the lobby, it's 1 o'clock. Then it's 2 o'clock. Seriously. 3. And the receptionist says, well, oh, Mal, he'll be back, don't worry. Finally, he comes in the door. Hey, come on back. Well, Mal would drink his lunch a lot, Mal Harrison.
Pretty typical back then.
Yeah, but he gave me my break. Same deal, I don't have anything, but you're welcome to come here and help us out and hang around, see what you can learn. Yes, sir. So schools were so overcrowded down there in Dade County, you were on two shifts, one of two shifts, and it never lapped over. You either went to school 7 to noon, and they told you when, or noon to 5. So I had 7 to noon. Man, I'd get down there about 1 o'clock every day and stay as late as I possibly could, and got to hang around and learn. And after it took about a year before they finally let me, learning everything, say something on the radio. And the very first thing I said, professionally, I guess, was they let me do what they call a tag on the end of a commercial that was already produced, and it was for a movie. And my first line, I guess I'll always remember that. You always remember this kind of thing. Now showing at a theater near you. And the production director, Joe Knuckles, let me tell you, he didn't take my first cut. He made me work on, no, Bob, you'd be a little more natural. I mean, he was just working on that. But the old voice thing probably helped me get in the door. But now it's like 1973, 1974. And country radio back then, the fans of country music, I mean, in Texas, we got every age. But largely Texas or country music fans start in mass at 30s, 40s, 50s. Back then, it was 40s, 50s, 60s, the average age.
Yeah.
So now I get on the radio, they give me the all-night shift eventually, and I've got to appear older, and this goes on for years. So, John, you're looking at a sad case where I literally spent the first half of my life trying to be much older than I was. Now, I've spent the second part of my life trying desperately hard to be much younger than I
hear
am.
you, brother.
I've never been my actual age, which had some blessings.
Well, back in 1974, there was a kind of a revolution going on in country music, right? I mean, if you think of all the Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, on and on and on, those guys, coming here to Texas. Yeah,
guy I talked to today, and if I can drop a name, Ray Benson, Sleep at the Wheel. Let me pick up that name I dropped. Paul McCartney told me recently I need to quit name dropping so much. I think that's funny. I don't know why. But Ray came in the radio station one day. Artists used to all go to the radios. They don't anymore because nobody puts them on the air.
Well, I've noticed when you were at KVET down South Austin, South Lamar, y'all had that big room outside your studio, like a hangout room with leather couches and guitars and things like that. And at your studio,
playing lounge.
Yeah, and your studio up on 360 for KOKE, you have that same atmosphere. Like, come in. And I've been in a lot of radio stations, right? I mean, I've done radio for 16 years. Nothing like you. I just do it 1 hour a week. But I've been in a lot of radio stations, and it's all
you're just too shy, John.
I know, I am. But it's very clinical, okay, this is the wall, this is, their microphone, here's the phone, whatever it may be, and your producer's on the other wall over there. Every radio station I've been where you've worked at over the years that we've known each other, it's like it's almost like your living room you're sitting in, right? And I love that. So is that how it was back then?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what is lost in radio today. For a variety of reasons. And there are other venues, but to get good local programming and to know what's going on, if an artist comes to town where they'd come early and sit down with you for an hour on the air, and radio stations kind of quit doing that for a variety of reasons. They realized in most cases, I mean, your higher rated radio stations all over the country here too, they're the ones, commercial radio stations who play a lot of music. Probably the highest rated radio station in Austin really doesn't have any live disc jockeys.
Right?
Nobody. I mean, they play the music because it's a background, it's a mood augmenter.
Right.
If I want to hear this, I go to this button.
Yeah.
So it's always left room for what radio used to be in serving a community. That's why this Austin Radio Network that you have, full disclosure, partnered with us as an advertising partner for Supreme Lending, which is pretty good.
Well, I've been with you for years. KVET,
that's right.
A lot of different places.
Well, it's good credibility for us. I mean, you are, if I may be half serious for a second,
you're
the name. So,
well, this is about you today. So let's. This is a question I had for later on in the interview, but I think it's a good time to bring it in. You mentioned about how the guys that just play music are, the ones that talk about the local and they're sharing about local things, local people. What do you think the future holds for these stations, for radio as a whole in the United States, as everything goes to your phone or, instant access in your car? And, most people, they don't listen to a lot of radio, even FM anymore, right? They listen to a podcast or they listen to a Spotify or blah, 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 Pandora, whatever it may be. How do you think, what do you envision for local radio? And I'm going to really say that because I still think that people want something local that they can just tune into and listen to. Maybe I'm old. But what do you see for the future?
they've been predicting the death of radio since that television thing came along. Now, you'd expect me to defend radio, but yeah, radio has changed a lot. But to answer your question, John, is according to Nielsen, that measures listening levels. Now, they were never really the big radio audience measurement company. That has always been television. But some years back, probably 10 by now, they bought Arbitron, the big radio ratings folks, and sophisticated it some more with basically listening devices that the respondents carry, and it picks up what you're listening to. A little more accurate than the old recall method of sit down and fill out what you listen to that day. And you can go back 20 years, certainly 10 years, but 20, and the number of people that listen to the radio, according to Nielsen, is as great as it was 20 years ago. Here's why. You have far more radio stations. I mean, when I came to Austin in the late 70s, I don't know, we might have had 8 or 9 stations. Now Nielsen prints out, because we have what we call rim shots, which we kind of are in some ways. One of our main stations is licensed to Thorndale that aims to Austin and all as well. We got 42 stations now. So you have more choices.
There's more people.
Right, and you have more people. And stations are doing a pretty good job, say, with that music programming, though it may not be local programming per se. When you bail out a lot of hits, and that's what you wanted to have on in the office today, that gives you what we call in the business the long quarter hours. And that's what you, the advertisers, are all seeking. It turns out that what's more important to advertisers, how many people listen is important, but it's not number one. It's how long do they listen?
Well,
how long do they listen? And what
engagement.
Right. Also the environment. If it's background music we have here, and there's a commercial for John McClellan's Supreme Lending, johnmcclellan.com, 3520 Executive Center Drive, Austin, Texas, license 207768. You know how long it takes in some of those radio environments for somebody to finally hear that message? You got to hear it over and over before they finally.
They call that frequency or something like
That's
that?
right. There's reach, which is how many, and frequency. So it's how long they listen. Well, with the kind of programming we specialize in, the sports station, our sports station, we have the Horn.
Oh, and I got to throw this in.
Okay, you're number one. You're the
we have a
savant
contest every year between KOKE and the Horn and Chris Waters' office, and 2 years in a row I beat the sports station. I enjoy beating you too, but I also beat the sports station.
We used to beat you.
This is true, and the sports stations never beat either one of us.
Actually, what you're not telling folks, and you won't, is John puts up somewhere in the neighborhood of like $10,000 every year
about me today.
to go to the charities we name. You know, like $7,000 to the winner. What charity will you?
SEAL Legacy Foundation.
Terrific.
Helping families of Navy SEALs who didn't make it back or didn't make it back whole, taking care of them with scholarships, and just general welfare. So yeah, I get goosebumps just thinking about it right now. So, what does the future hold for radio? Do you?
It's not going to go away. But it's used differently.
Right.
How you do a home loan now is way different than 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Way different.
Absolutely.
A lot of rules, less latitude, knowing I
get it.
It wasn't who you knew, it's what you knew, now anyway. But it used to be who you knew. And, the banks say, we'll sign off on that.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Same with radio. And there was a big binge in the 90s the mega companies getting very interested, and kind of like in the same model you saw happen with a lot of industries like banking. We'll just go buy up all the small
Yeah,
ones.
that happened back in the late
And
90s.
we'll control everything.
Yeah, there's a huge
And
consolidation.
well, in a quest to do that, I won't name the properties, but here in town, one company bought a set of radio stations for somewhere between $90 and $100 million. The actual value of those stations today, based on cash flow and all the other stations in town, might be $40 million.
Yeah.
So the value is not in the value becomes in the programming and finding that niche, the niche or whatever. South Austin we say niche, and we're the little group. We're the only locally owned group. Actually, Jose Jaime Garcia is a family operation. They have 2 or 3 AM stations that program Tejano and Spanish language, but of the mainstream radio stations, and nobody thought we could make it, and we've just been blessed, and because we've been able.
Your listeners are some of the best I've ever seen. They are so loyal to you. They come out in droves to see you when you're doing things. When my company or other companies, I've heard this from multiple people, advertise. I've had people call when you're doing my ad. They'll call me and they go, John, I need to get a mortgage. They say, Bob told me to call you. And I'm like, Bob? And they're like, yeah, Bob Cole. Oh, do you know Bob? No, I just listen to him every day. So,
since my mother died, are you still getting those? Or are you...
Right.
Well,
it's like they have a personal relationship with you. And I guess to a certain degree that they do with you, right? If that's their routine, is to wake up and listen to your show on the way to work or whatever it may be.
Well said. I think the testimony to that is being around for a long time, and don't breach their trust. Don't break your promises. I will only endorse what I have used and fully believe in, like with Supreme Lending.
Or ATX Hot Sauce.
Or ATX Hot Sauce, right, yes. But Supreme Lending, you've done 2 for me already, and you and Josh Flores in the process of refinancing right now again. Yeah. And I ain't easy.
Yeah.
And not that I'm hard. It's like credit scores, not good.
All right, we're not talking about me today. This is about you today.
But seriously, being able to talk about knowing this person a long time and why they're different. I mean, that's what we have to illustrate for anybody that's an advertising partner to our audience. Why is this woman or this guy better? What is unique?
Can I tell you something? So I have a big tagline on all advertising. I like to local, accountable, and I got that from you back years ago. You're at KVET, and I was in with Lance Aldridge, and we were trying to write a commercial, and we went and talked to you for a little while, and I was like, I don't know what to say, and you're like, well, you're local, right? And you go talk about being local, talk about that, and about being responsible, right? And I went local, responsible, local, accountable. And then I took that.
Is that where that came from? No kidding.
That's exactly where it came from.
Well, I'm honored because sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. But look who you're competing against. Not going to name them, but they're all over the TV. Ditech, Rocket Mortgage. Yeah. You're going to deal with somebody in Minnesota. You're never going to deal with the same person twice. You're going to do the majority of the work. You're going to send this stuff by the internet. Yeah. You're going to be dying for information. Your staff, which is often usually voted for this size business, best place to work, they're that happy on the phone. I wish I could name all the folks. Yeah. You have it. No, it does sound like I'm trying to turn the tables on you. But no,
I'm interviewing you today,
purpose,
Bob.
I got you, and I'm going to steal it from you. The purpose of this show, as I understood it, ties into it. Which has Austin changed? Is it going to change? Is it threatened? How to get where it is? And I'm no expert, but it's something I've studied, and we can all say that. But this is what is so unique to me. You made folks endure about me growing up in Miami. So from there, I'm going to tie this in.
How did you get from there to here?
There was a big broadcast company, back in those days, called Sonderling, Egmont Sonderling, and that's his name. Lived in Miami, so that's where he had his corporate headquarters. He didn't have any radio stations, but I had his corporate headquarters there, and his corporate programming director and all would listen to me on the radio station. And I came to work one night and had a message from him, said he wanted to hire me to do a commercial. Well, at that point, I'm 16, 17 years old. It's like, ooh, I'm supposed to hire me to do a commercial. the man, I called him first thing next morning. He said, I don't have a dang commercial, but, we do have the biggest country radio station in America, KIKK in Houston, and you belong in Houston. I said, well, I'm flattered, but I just moved across the street here to this big station in Miami, and it was a big station. Now, I like doing the all-night show. Well, I'm a kid, but I loved it. You could talk to people, and my 7 to midnight lead-in was Larry King. Now, I don't mean Larry on the network. Larry was in that studio, and
oh wow,
and I was in this studio. And he'd come over, he liked me for some reason. Well, he knew my mother. And
with his suspenders?
Well, sometimes. And he'd give me tips. Best tip he ever gave me, I think we all could learn from. I had interviewed somebody, he heard it driving home. He goes, yeah, that guy on with the book. You read that book, didn't you? I said, yeah, I got through most of it because I was going to interview him. Biography or something. He goes, don't do that. Now, Larry read a book a day. He's a reader. He said, I won't read a book before I put somebody on because my listeners haven't read the book. They want to know what's in it. And if I already know what's in it, I'm going to screw up telling them or forget to tell them. I got to ask that guy.
Yeah.
Then I'll read the book. And he goes, you know what you're doing? While they're answering your question, you're sitting there thinking about your next question. You don't even hear what they said. And he was right. I'd say, hey, John, what's the mortgage business like? And John said, oh, it's really bad. It's terrible. That's nice, John. Let me ask you, how'd you get in the business? You weren't really listening like the listeners listening.
Right.
So I got to learn from folks like that. So on this thing, I said, well, this is how stupid I could be. Still am. They said, we won't fly you to Houston when you're off on weekend. Take a look at that station. And I said, well, I'll do it, but only if you let me pay my own way. What a moron. I'm still that way. And I went out there, and buddy, I can tell you that story someday, but that's what I've been looking for. I've been through Texas, but man, I ended up at the Astrodome, and they were doing a tractor pull. And I had time off, so I went over there. I had to see the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah.
They used to sell something called the foam dome. It was like a popcorn bucket.
Yeah.
Beer. Yeah, I'm 18. That was, I think, and it might not have been the law, actually, but I could always pass. So,
well, that voice you could. And by the way, Houston back in the 70s, that later era of the 70s was a big booming oil.
Oh.
I mean, everything was happening.
I bought a house in Houston, and it took so long to get it built because they couldn't get like electric meters that I was leaving Houston before
Wow.
as it finally got done. It was a boom town, and in many ways still is. It's admirable what they've accomplished.
Well, they definitely go through cycles more than I think Austin does.
Oh, absolutely.
Austin is, we're a little bit more, well, they are too, but even nowadays a little bit more diverse than we have been over the last, 5 decades. But they are still tied into that oil a lot more than we are here.
Yeah.
In the early 80s they found out.
It was
as
fun.
we did here in Austin.
It was fun, I think, also to live in Houston, not only because you get to define yourself as a Texan, but which was very important to me as I learned it. But John, you could hate Dallas, the plastic, synthetic. We had all the Oilers and the Cowboys and Love You Blue, wonderful era. But I digress. So I end up in Houston. Yeah, I mean I was there no time at all. I'm drinking that foam dome, and I had my cowboy bow down in Miami. I mean I bought my clothes at truck stops.
Yeah,
pearl snap shirts, and I had that beer.
Is that the bus you took from Miami to Houston, where you paid your own way?
Continental Airlines, I remember well. And I'm drinking this foam dome, and maybe feeling a little, and I'm looking at the eighth wonder of the world and the tractor pull, and I look around all of a sudden, all the people. And I said, these people are like me. Now, when you grow up in Miami, it's still the same today. Everybody tries to live, usually, what you all call in your bit, birds of a feather,
Mm-hmm.
This kind of psychographic goes. But, not everybody's alike, and especially in places like that. A lot of them come from other countries. A lot of them don't even speak the language, speak English. El Salvador, they're from everywhere.
Right.
Then I realized, well, I'm coming here. It was an emotional, but great move. After I got here, quickly had some friends in Austin. I kept hearing all these great things about Austin.
Especially in that era.
You got to come here one weekend. And I remember finally my wife and I did, and came in on what's the airport side now, and all I saw coming into town, and there's still a few out there, were these salvage yards and junk yards and sort of the old Del Valley. And I went, well, what's so great about this place? I said, well, let's find a motel first before we call everybody. The old Villa Capri sits right where that Frank Denius practice bubble is right now. Villa Capri was legendary. Wasn't any time I talked to those folks like Jim Ray and all, I said, man.
You make it over the Armadillo World Headquarters?
It had closed within a year by the time I got here. But I got to know Eddie Wilson well.
Speaking of that, the Threadgills, right across the street from where it used to be downtown off Riverside, they closed that down about a year or so ago. They had a big auction there, and Eddie was there. And my buddy Kevin and I were like, we're going to go to this. We're going to pick up some really cool stuff, and we have the catalog. And
did you go to the auction in New Braunfels?
No, we went to the one here, and it was packed with people. And so the problem was that all these old Austinites came in, right, with their money now. Before, they probably didn't have money. Now they do. And there was tons of people bidding on stuff. But every time something went up on the auction, Eddie would get up and say, I had a story about this one. And all of a sudden, the price would go from here to here. And I mean stuff that a neon sign on the wall, and he'd tell a story about it. And this one time when Janis Joplin was in here, and that was her sign. She had to put it in her thing, and blah blah blah. All of a sudden, now instead of $100, it's $1,000. Kevin and I walked out of there with nothing in our hands, nothing at all. But it was amazing. I did walk out something in my heart, though. Amazing to hear the stories, and then I kept thinking, have we lost that part of Austin? Austin just evolves.
Well, I've taken the long way to get there, but so then I moved to Austin, which was, man, it didn't fit my career model. A, it wasn't going to be at night. They want me to do mornings. B, I'm going to a small city. Now I've gone from Miami to Houston, and in radio back then, the bigger the market, the more successful you were. And I'm on this self-prescribed trajectory. But I saw something here that came from living in highly transitory communities. What I didn't understand, that I've grown to understand in this sort of study, is most people where they grow up, it may be a little small town in Arkansas, they're focused on how they get out of there. Mm-hmm. That's fine, but we ain't staying. I grew up, I'm going to get out of here. Yeah. Wherever it is. I saw this place in Austin, and we have seen this place. Or maybe folks come here to go to school, talked to a guy today, Saul Paul, a terrific man, and came here and went to the University of Texas and said, I ain't ever leaving.
How do I find out how to stay here? Figure it out.
Exactly. What I think has happened is we always chided people. And of course I was chided. That's why I kept a secret where you're from, You're not, you weren't born in Texas. Well, you ain't real. When'd you get here? I've been here 5 years.
So they were complaining about you back then.
All of us, if we were new.
Yeah.
And there's still a little of that today, but not as much. And what I saw is that everybody that came, you took that obligatory beating because you were buying in. I mean, you bought in big. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was so proud to be from a place I was proud of.
Yeah.
This is before Austin had this fascination now. I mean, you get on an airplane and you sit next to somebody from Tucumcari and we were Austin, you know.
Yeah.
We
were under the radar, and you had to almost come to school here or grow up here to really appreciate it.
I always love what Bum Phillips said when he was coaching the Oilers. He had all those bumisms. Ain't but two kinds of, like football coaches, them's been fired, going to be. But he said, ain't but two kinds of people live in Texas. Them that live in Austin, and them that want to.
That's fantastic.
Okay. We have put so many people in growing. Well, there are movements here to stop growth forever that have caused some of the headaches. That I do become concerned, and have for a long time now, about the dilution of this very special culture. It's going to be hard for people to remember this if they ever even knew it. But I've been in Austin since the late 70s. If you don't count that couple of years I went away to Washington, D.C. in the early 80s, a little combat duty, call it that. and came back. I didn't know it was coming back. I mean,
So you're saying that the Austin culture is still here, but it's diluted because of all.
well, it's diluted because folks don't get to buy in. But from the 70s through the 80s, through the 90s, and I'm going to tell you, on into the early 2000s, we're 20 years in now, I would always brag. I knew one woman that came here, and she didn't like Austin. And I would brag to anybody. I was proud. You never hear anybody say, I hate it here. I got to get out. I never heard it, ever. I hear it all the time now. Now, what folks do,
The traffic.
now they're going to Bastrop or Hayes County or Williamson County,
or whatever it may be.
and just, I hate Austin, I got to get out of there, for a variety of reasons. Where we're not all together like we once were. We're not all buying in like we once were. And at the end of the day, that's what I got to put because I don't come from this environment and I love it. And I remember I'd been here, I was just living down the street here. It's the only time I ever lived in North Austin. Early 70s, had a townhome apartment over here off Wood Hollow. We're on Executive Center Drive right now. It's right behind here. Great place.
But my first apartment I ever had was on Wood Hollow.
No kidding.
Right before it hits Far West.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet your house is bigger than mine now. Anyway, today. So.
I bet it's not.
I was living over there, and I'm trying to figure out what is so great about this place. But they didn't come with refrigerators, and I needed a refrigerator. And the one I had was going out. So I told my friend Jim Ray, that I worked with over at KOKE, worked for. I said, I gotta leave here a little while. I gotta go over Sears or Montgomery Ward's and get a refrigerator. He just chewed me out. You dumb like ass. I mean, he just, Cole, God, you're a Yankee. And he tells me, you don't go buy a refrigerator from Sears. You buy it from the Big O, Oscar, Depew, and he names them all off. Yeah. A little bit down, a little bit. We supported local. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a Sears here. That's where I was headed.
Yeah.
But the way I grew up, they came up with that financing. That's where my mother went, big city, got your refrigerator. No. We were all in this, may have been very different, but in so many ways we were all together because I think you care about people. They're your neighbors. So today when you walk in a 7-Eleven or a lot of stores, even Goodwill, they part of the training at cashiers, you got to yell over, "Welcome to Goodwill."
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. I haven't heard that lately.
Well, it's because you're going over the Armani shop.
Oh.
I go to Salvation Army. And bragging about it.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. But now they do it, and it's programmed. It's not a deal where you hold the door for somebody and say howdy, man. And I know a lot of this is generational. Things do change, but I'll walk down the hall of our office building and offices and see people I know in the morning. Go, hey. That never used to happen. Yeah. Oh, maybe it did. Well, but what never did happen was people say, I got to get out of here.
Well, listen to this.
And I hear it all
a year and a half ago, you know where Allendale is over here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right off Burnett Road.
Great historic neighborhood.
We moved in a year and a half ago. Not one neighbor said hello. In fact, I've been there for a year and a half. And
that's a classic community neighborhood of everybody
and
together.
I had a package delivered at one point. I went next to my next door neighbor, knocked on the door, looked out. Thank you. Just put it right there and shut the door. This is before even COVID, right?
Yeah.
One neighbor across the street came out on the street one day and introduced herself. Other than that, I don't even know what they look like, what their names are. And maybe it's my fault, but I was sitting back after I first moved in because I remember in neighborhoods I've lived around Austin, somebody moves in next door. Hey, this is John. Where y'all from? What's going on? And it was very strange. It's like and you can tell, especially people on one side, they've been here for a long, long time. It's almost like they're like, oh, they're probably not from here. We better not talk to them, kind of thing.
But in Allendale and
Crestview,
Terrytown, and off Westover and Enfield, that's another thing I would see. there would be, I don't know what the dollar, a mansion. Might have even been $1 million back then. And next to it would be a $40,000 house.
Yeah.
So the hippies were living next to the high dollar, sophisticated rich people with plenty of respect.
And all going to Wheatsville Co-op or going over there and,
Yeah.
I can't
Now
remember.
times have changed in our country.
Yeah.
We're divisive, we're leery, but the one thing that could be holding us together better, I'm not preaching or professing, I should say, or advancing the notion, John, that it's gone, because it's not. It's not.
No,
Just travel a little. Because I go, boy, I can't wait to get back to Austin. That guy was a jerk to me, and that wouldn't happen in Austin. Well, it will, but not with any kind of frequency, But we're losing that because if you come here and you don't see it, you don't know how to do it or to buy in or understand that. But that's what I worked on for so long in my study that wasn't funded by anything. Was, ask people what's great here. Oh, it's the environment. It's the hill country. It's the lakes. It's the clean air.
It's the people.
It was the people all loving,
And that's why
loving the package.
That's why you brought Coke back to life, right? Coke FM back to life. It's one of the reasons, preserve our culture. I mean, you've got an award for it. You've opened up, and been a part of some restaurants, a tavern, the Hills Cafe.
I didn't mean to get in the restaurant business, to be clear.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. Yeah, not if they're normal. But,
Don't you think we have a responsibility? That's what this kind of podcast is about, Bob. I'm trying to put together some people who have been here for a while that influence Austin. I have influenced Austin and where we are, know where we come from, and what are any, if there are, I don't know if there are solutions, right? Do we just kind of sit back and say, I'm going to do my little part, whatever that is, but I don't know how much of an effect it's going to have. I mean, or is there something larger that can be done? Obviously, with COVID and everything going on, it's been a struggle, right? Even meeting new people, because nowadays you talked about people kind of looking away. Now they have a mask on, and people tend to hide behind that mask. I don't know if you've noticed that when people are walking around stores or things like that.
even more, you're right.
Even more,
That's a good point.
they hide behind that surgical mask or whatever it is because it gives them, it's like having sunglasses
It's
on.
that excuse of, I
I
don't
don't
want
wanna
to
be
risk anything
uncomfortable.
going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when that wasn't really part of the decision, I mentioned living in another highly transitory place, Washington, D.C. A guy named Bill Figgins told me when I first moved up there, he said, this town is like a big toilet, and they flush it every 4 years. Everybody leaves and new stuff comes in.
Yeah.
And boy, so there was really never any sense of community, whether it was Virginia, Maryland, or the district itself. And my wife was coming home from work one time I think it was on the BW, and had a flat tire. Thousands of cars. There were no cell phones at that point. Cell phones were invented and first in use in testing by Motorola, who she worked for, back then during the Reagan administration. But we didn't have cell phones. And she was stuck, and nobody stopped. Well, we moved back to Austin, and she has flat here on the South Lamar Bridge. There was a traffic jam for everybody trying to stop and help her, including Cactus Pryor.
Oh, really?
Going, stop. Can I help you, young lady? So we were a small town then. No, not really. It's a lot smaller than it is now.
We were the big town with the small town atmosphere.
Yes,
That's
they
what
say.
I always described it as.
Yeah.
They say, what's Austin like? Well, it's a big town with a small town atmosphere. I was talking to two Uber drivers in a row about 6 months ago. Both had moved here from other cities. One was from New York, one somewhere else. And I go, what do you think of Austin? They're like, I'm from New York, and they did their accent, but I've never been treated the way that in my life, the way people treat me here. Everybody says hello to me. They say thank you.
That's reassuring.
They-
Because it's not gone.
No, it's not gone.
And
It's
if they
not
come
gone.
from somewhere else, they're seeing it. I
I
don't
hope
think
they're
they see
picking
it
up
to
the
the
habit,
level,
right?
Yeah, that was so epidemic before.
Right.
It was a pandemic of caring, and yeah, I mean, realistically, times have changed. Social media and computers, folks are less socially engaged. But I think our greatest gift in life is other people. not just the one you may choose to spend your life with, but friendships and being able to appreciate people for who they are. I mean, I bet 4 or 5 times that I can think of. I ask everybody at some point, usually, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? It's all a part of me still trying to figure out how you got here, what you think of it. One other thing I'd add, these folks that, understandably for political reasons, the taxes, the traffic, some of the attitude, the division that people have, they hate Austin. So they moved on to Georgetown.
Yeah.
Now they'll get on a plane, and somebody say, "Where are you from?"
They'll still say Austin.
They say Austin. Oh, Austin, like we talked about.
Right.
And they'll beam about it. So Austin now, I think, is more than just within the city limits. It always kind of has been, but it was very defined. You look at Cedar Park now. I mean, that's the epitome of high-class suburbia.
Yeah, Leander.
But you've been here long enough. Those were the Cedar Choppers.
Oh, I remember.
And proud to be known as that.
Yeah.
The Cedar Choppers, we're the backwards folks, and leave us alone, and we like you, you like us. We have the annual Cedar Chopper Festival.
I remember we years ago when I was probably about 20 years old, they had a big contest between the South Austin and North Austin. It was a tug of war across Town Lake.
John Kelso put that on.
Yeah, and I say Town Lake because I still call it Town Lake, but it's Ladybird Lake now for all you.
Which, by the way, I still to this day think should be Lake Ladybird.
Lake Ladybird, yeah, I like that. But so they had a big rope tied across, and it was the yuppies of North Austin, the yuppies against the what did they call it? I want to say I can't remember.
Oh, the rednecks of South Austin.
Yeah, it was basically the rednecks, right?
Yeah, I mean that was the thing. That whole north against south of the river, north of the river, had always kind of been there. But what do? We embraced it and made fun of it.
Absolutely.
Now, if my neighbor puts up a Wendy Davis sign, hypothetically, and I'm voting for Chip Roy, well, I hate that bastard.
Yeah. Well,
no, that's not the case. But that's how we're thinking now.
I agree with that. And I think social media has something to do with that, too, because it only serves up what you look into. And so you only see you only see one side of it, of everything now, depending on which side.
Well, I know you see it in your business. So you don't exactly sell homes. You partner with great folks like Chris Waters, but but you're making the deals happen. There you go. I'd pick that one up. Chris Waters, 2 T's. People will go check out a neighborhood during political season, it may be, and if they see too many Trump signs or Biden-Harris signs, I ain't living here. I love everything else.
I love having a diverse family. My mom and I are completely different ends of the spectrum politically, but I still love my mom, and I listen to my mom. And I have friends that don't agree with me politically, but they're still my friends, and I still treat it because that's how I was raised, though.
I mentioned Ray Benson a little while ago, politically 180. The guy that ran the Statesman editorials for years and all the very liberal opinion of the many years. I'm more conservative, just frankly. Actually, I like everybody, I grew up Democrat. We all were Democrats.
Blue Dog Democrat.
At one time. Yeah. In fact, last story, I promise I'll pull out of nowhere. I remember being about this big and in the back seat of my mother's 1962 Ford Falcon with my aunt sitting here, my mother sitting here, and I'm in the back, and didn't have air conditioning, and we're driving all the way to Knoxville, Tennessee for the summer vacation. And about 200 miles out of town, the two of them are giving me a lecture about my Uncle Bob. And he only has one kidney. And he and Beryl, and we're staying with them, they never had kids. And he gets rattled easy, and you can get on nerves. You got to be under great behavior. And truth is, and it's just us talking. I mean, and I'm named after my Uncle Bob. I'm named after. And they're telling me all about their brother and how careful I got to be again. And I can't ever roughhouse. And he said, but, be yourself, but you just got to be under control. They don't quite understand kids, and plus, your Uncle Bob's just different. He's a Republican. Well, when you're 6 years old, you hear that and say, oh, the Republicans are the weird ones. So that's how I grew up. And then, you can make your decisions over time.
Then you figure out we're all the weird ones.
But in Austin, my best friends, like Arnold Garcia, hey, this, if anybody even half like me, they're not going to like me now. sad to say. I love, and I'm very close in many ways, to Mayor Steve Adler and his wife Diane. Couldn't be anybody doing what he thinks is right, probably screwing this place up more. But we love each other as people, and our motivations and friends. And you might see him in Cabo soon.
I think he was already. I don't think he's going back anytime soon.
Not till after this, till he gets the vaccine.
Now that we're on that point, what do you think of the city's take on these homeless camps that are everywhere? I mean, to me, it's an affront. If you don't want to be California, and I have friends that come here from California, and they go, this is starting to look just like where I live, and this is why I moved here. Why I moved out of there. I'm not sure what the solution is, but you don't see it in other Texas cities. Why is it so bad here?
The problem was, frankly, I can prove this. It is not, I think, a theory. Everybody's got a theory, right? Conspiracy theory. They used homeless people as pawns. Mm-hmm. It was created purposefully to have the crisis to create social service funding. Even the, $68 million they first emergency authorized when all of a sudden these came up. You look at the actual number of dollars that went to them.
No, it's
5%. Having folks that are here can't get lawyers and they don't have documentation. Money went to things like that. Well, we didn't want them to be homeless. Oh, come on. It's social engineering. Now, Austin's always been a place for social engineering. Yeah. And so it's attracted more people from around the country.
Blue dot and a sea of red.
And hats off, because our system, as I believe so strongly in, is vote in who you want.
Yeah. Well, the state of Austin doesn't seem to do that. There seems to be one block. That
we currently have 11 of 11 that are as sold on socialism as anyone can be, and maybe even further about distributing wealth and total equity. And you have as much as I do, and that's been proven not to work. And it's given us the advancements
you want to take away
that just created this flu vaccine.
Yeah.
That created all this high tech that is funding all of this.
Made this great country what it is.
Yeah. You know,
and I didn't want to get into a whole political thing today, but that's part of
But those folks vote, and as we pointed out, as you've helped define, within the city limits, the kind of folks that have moved in here think a lot that way too.
Yeah.
As opposed,
I just see it's a symptom of a greater decline in our culture as a whole here.
A cancel culture.
Yeah.
So if I don't agree with you, I have to cancel you.
Right. And I also think that COVID has taken Austin down that path even a little bit further, because now look at the music venues that have shut down, the great restaurants that have shut down, the bars, Austin was a place of going out, doing things, seeing concerts, South by Southwest, ACL, going downtown, going to West 6th Street, East 6th Street, Dirty 6 they call it now, going to Nutty Brown Cafe, going to, these myriad of different places, and people are not doing it anymore. And if you're not together, then all of a sudden you're just on social media and you're separating yourself.
And that's what I saw. I was very lucky to do pretty well, for a poor kid from Hialeah, Florida, and seriously. I mean, I was raised on my mother's job as a $125 a week secretary. Mm-hmm. And I was very blessed, but didn't have what most everybody else had. I got doing pretty well in the radio business, and I thought, what do I want to do also? Because I don't want to do something else. I said, well, what I love is Austin, Texas. And what I'm concerned about was frankly best put by a Yankee fella, we would say. My dad used to say that, what little I was ever around my dad. He was telling me about his best friend, Joe Marchitelli, who he was in the Marines with, and they'd stayed friends. He told me one time when I was going to meet him, he says, now Joe's a Yankee, but he's one of the good ones. He meant it. He half meant it. We hired this guy, Or he came to Austin, actually. We ended up hiring him. He was an old friend of mine. And he was from Pennsylvania, New York, Seattle, Washington. Now he's immersed not only in Texas, but Austin. And he's a very analytical guy. And I love to talk to him. His name's Jason Kane. In fact, I named my son Jason after him. I mean, I love this guy. And he says, you know, what I figured out, it's 25 years ago. People in Austin, they love their joints. And, you know, he wasn't making a Willie Nelson reefer reference.
Yeah.
He says, everybody seems to define themselves by their joints. That's about the time that I noticed that, you know, the tavern was going away. Mm-hmm. Hills Cafe with all those memories had sat there empty, and the Goodnight family understandably didn't want to risk somebody messing that up. The Frisco Nighthawk. My idea was authentically in the same places, you know, restore. Now we couldn't do the same thing with the Frisco Nighthawk because the reason the Akins family had to give it up, now. all those years, they had leased that property, and they only had like a year left on the lease. And Walgreens decided they wanted in, and they said, "Look, you can hang around a year, or we'll accelerate that lease and give you a whole bunch of money." And you know, they run that place not making a lot of money, but kept it going. And then came to me and said, "Well, look, if you want to keep it going, you just can't do it right here." So we ended up just up the road, and they're all. You know, Hills is closed right now after a good 18-year run, but that has to do, and I think this is relevant to what you're asking, that has to do with the fact that sits, you know, when we restored it, it was a DMZ right there at, you know, what I call the Ben White Freeway.
You know,
you cross that on Congress.
That's not South Austin anymore.
Well,
that's something else.
That's where there were news every night, and the guys were getting arrested with the hookers and the drugs, and I mean.
Can I tell you what I call that area?
What?
I call it Seesaw. Southeast South Austin.
And now it's like the hottest thing in the world, St. Elmo in the world. Yeah. But I'm proud to say that us going in there and revitalizing that Hills complex and that great old building that had been added onto all those years helped revitalize that. And then came Matt Mathias, and he said, well, I'm going to put some condos in right over here, the Bel Airs. And next thing you know, here it comes. And less pawn shops and more rejuvenation of Austin, Texas, south of South Congress. Okay, what's your reward for that? The property tax assessment went from $300,000 to, now it does sit on a fair amount of land that you really can't see there, but a lot of it's not usable. It's in huge bluffs, goes all the way back to First Street there. But the property tax value of the assessment became $14-15 million a year, and it won't allow a restaurant to survive. No. So the Goodnight family,
just like the Rick, and if you own the land and that's happening to you, you own the building and you're renting, then you have to pass it along to the restaurateur who's renting from you. It's not sustainable.
And the Goodnight family is the reason we have Hills. Charlie Goodnight. Back then, I mean, studying all the history, and all the old timers tell me, if you did business, this is how it was before I got here. You did any business south of the river, you had to come to shake old Charlie Goodnight's hand. I mean, this is how business was done. And the deals, you know, even if it involved a lawyer, you sat there and ate something, shook a hand, and your words you bond, you're texting.
Good old boys network.
Yeah. Talking about some of these things that are watered down. So, boy, I want to see something like that, you know, continue. Well, basically the Goodnights accelerated that lease because now what they've got to do, because of property taxes here, which ain't going to go down anymore.
No, they're not.
Is condos, offices, street-level retail. And the dream, though it's not a promise, is the centerpiece of that, or right there will be a Hills Cafe in that hopefully same exact location. But seeing those things continue to perpetuate the history, in my mind, if you go in a place like Hills, one of the greatest compliments folks say, this is like a museum.
It's like, I mean, if you look at Fred Gill's was kind of the same too. There's a couple of restaurants around Austin that have the broken spoke. It's like walking into, I mean, that one, it really is a museum in there, right? And I've been to the Hills, and it is exactly that. And maybe that's what you're saying, is that we have to have these little oases maybe around Austin that hold on to that culture, hold on to those memories, right, of who we were, where we came from, so we
Yeah.
don't forget them, right?
Exactly. And because they're defining places. Think about a restaurant. Again, I didn't mean to get in the restaurant business, but they were our joints, right? The joints. It's when we invest in, say, going out to eat or drink, it's an investment. I mean, you can go fast food, you can go to, Chili's and Applebee's are great. But virtually no one says, "Oh, I remember our wedding night. We went to Applebee's."
Yeah, exactly.
That's
We remember we went dancing at In-N-Out Burger.
bingo.
Right.
Yeah. So having the reliability and the access to change, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it becomes your dominant culture, you got a chain culture. You got a chain culture. And we see it all over the country. And that's plenty fine for some folks who think, "I just want to get out of here," not here, but wherever they are. This was where you wanted to come before, and it still is. Let's not lose sight of that. But I think the main vitamin that fed the beast, we're deficient in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, like I said before, we need to remind people of Austin's past, right? A little bit of trivia. Do you know what the lithium
You never know where you're going till you know where you've been.
Do you know what the
These folks
lithium
coming to town
clouds-
don't know it.
Have you ever heard about the lithium clouds?
No.
So Austin, and when the sun goes down, it was beautiful last night, was a good example. It's a red sunset, right? You can see just the reds and colors and everything.
Sure. In the morning, too.
Yeah, and in the Austin, they used to call it the Friendly City, right? Back in the 50s
That's right.
and 60s.
That's right.
And they said that because they thought that there was a lithium layer above Austin.
We're all breathing that?
They were breathing in. It makes everybody happy. It makes everybody weird.
Maybe
there's too
never
many
heard
people.
that.
Maybe there's too many people. There's not enough lithium to go around.
I've never heard
Yeah.
that. I believe it.
Yes.
It's so consistent with these other great stories that are so unique to this
Yeah.
place. No, I wasn't born here. But I started saying something one day. I was driving to work. I don't know. I was the old KOKE
You're
FM.
proud to be an Austinite. I'm proud
I was
to
driving
be
to
an
work, and I
Austinite.
remember coming over the Town Lake Bridge on Mopac, which, by the way, great Austin history, was built for, I believe, 4 or 5 years before it was allowed to open, because the no-growthers said, "You can't open up that part of town."
This is in the 70s.
And they stopped it in court over and over. So you could go one direction, you couldn't come the other. Southwest Parkway, when it was built, trees started growing through the middle of the
Nobody
road.
used Southwest Park. In fact, they were going to shut it down. I remember
And
that.
their point was, if we build this, then people will build alongside it.
Yeah,
It has happened.
yeah.
I think, though, through their efforts, for all the things Austin did like that, look how it turned out.
Yeah.
But there was some kind of ultimate balance. Our city councils was a pendulum, and it would swing never all the way left and never all the way right, but it did this. It doesn't do that anymore.
No, it's stuck. I don't know what we're going to do about that, because it didn't seem like anything just happened in this last election to make any difference.
Well, in that runoff,
yes.
one of the folks running that, in my opinion, is probably a pretty good guy, but he got pretty cocky with, "Here's how it's going to be. And we want to blow up the police station and scrape it and sell that valuable land and give the money to all those east of the interstate." This is what he published, that have been disenfranchised. The values that I think we all shared, even though we may have disagreed on the kind of music we liked, our politics, we did have these common values of community, which never said the police are demons and we don't need them.
We do.
But that's a thought. Yeah.
Bob, I think I've got one other thing for you. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years when it comes to promoting
Walnut Hills Nursing Home.
Walnut Hills Nursing?
Yes.
Okay, I'll come visit you. I promise. As long as I'm allowed in and go visit.
If I had money, I'd go to that Westminster
What are
thing.
your plans over the next 4 or 5 years once we're out of this pandemic thing? And you've already been doing it before. If you had to put any thought to what you can do other than your amazing voice on the radio every single day to help us remember where we come from and what we're and where we want to go. I mean, I think it's an important question, and I know you didn't know I was going to ask this question, but I'm starting to ask it to a lot of people because it makes you think. If we want to sit here and complain and bitch about something, right? This is not the city I grew up in. This is not the city that was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We need to do something about. We need to do something about. Well, what is that? then what are we going to do? And then we all need to come together as a group and say, this is what we are going to do individually.
Testing 1, 2. I don't even think it's working.
Yeah.
It's not wired up to anything.
That was my rant for that.
John, I was skating a little on your question because I don't think I have a better answer, though I do want to give it some thought and email you. But
well, no, and that's kind of what I wanted to
but
leave
you know,
with.
frankly, I think my answer is, this is conversation, wandering around, trying to connect this piece and that piece and all. It's helped me realize that what I believe I've always been committed to, which is appreciating what is so unique here and helping other people appreciate it. Tell the stories, how this got that way. I mean, a place where everybody was frankly so happy, as you said, that people thought they were breathing lithium. It was really, in many ways, that idyllic. And that's probably not going to happen again. But
we can take some of that with us.
It's very real that we become some other place that where people are not invested in the great gift we all have, which is one another. Now, you're not going to love everybody, but man, you ain't got to hate everybody because they didn't look at you right, put the wrong yard sign up, or they're a different age. I mean, we live in a time where it would be horrendous and prosecutable to say, I can't like that guy because he's black. There is no penalty for, I can't stand that son of a bitch. He's a Republican. Everything that person is all wrapped up in one thing.
Or whatever it may be.
Just as a for instance, exactly, yeah. That's working against us and is more apparent because we're not as invested in each other. Yet at the end of the day, it's like this morning, Capillary Food Bank. The warehouse is empty again. And when I last checked, in just a few hours today, folks like pretty much $30 at a time have gotten on the little radiothon that started at 8 this morning, and last I heard is about $80,000 right here before Christmas with no warning. And it was really bad, we thought, back in April when we asked folks, can you donate? And then they donated $370,000. Buy a box of foods, $30, to feed people that live here, your neighbors. I feel like I've underestimated the caring that's here. It's still great. It's better than most places. But the premise, I believe, of your podcast each week is how do we get where we are and how can we keep it? Well, as you said, you got to know where you've been.
Yeah.
You got to know what may not be right. What can we agree on that we had before we don't have now? And is it important enough and valuable enough to go get it?
Right.
Seize it back again.
And I think it is. And that's the whole reason for this podcast, is to talk to people like you that have been influential in this city for decades, right? And who still have a saying and still have power and to make changes. And anyway, I appreciate you being on the show today. Bob, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. I know it's a little cold, but let's go down to Hippie Hollow now like we always do.
Guys, thanks for watching the podcast today. Don't forget to subscribe below. Influence ATX. Watch for some of our previews from other guests coming up. Bob Cole, everybody.